That's good, that's good. I'll see you next week. No, honestly, it's my pleasure. No worries at all. Hi! You my 9 o'clock? Fantastic. Would you like to come in? Good, good. Make yourself comfortable over there. Can I get you anything? Of course you do. Everyone likes that negative. Oh, don't worry about making a mess. It's easy enough to clean, and I guarantee I've seen worse in this job. Just let me know if you want any more. Now, just looking at the file here, you were referred to me by Elder Mendakayor, is that right? My god, that's a name and a half. Yeah, how is the old guy? Yeah, very intense glare, right? Is he still wearing the purple velvet? No, you'd think it's an old one thing, but it's really not. It's, oh, do I tell you? Oh, why not? We're all friends here. It's cosplay. It's genuinely. We used to watch a lot of Doctor Who when we were younger, and I think it's based on the third. You know, John Pertwee. Oh, what a voice. What a voice. Very intense. Love that guy. Oh, yeah. Do not tell him I told you that. He's very, very embarrassed by it, but he's a laugh. He's a laugh if you can get on his good side. Fantastic. Now, a few things before we start. I'm sure you're aware of this already, but I just want to make sure that you know. Everything you say in this room is strictly confidential. This is not a courtroom. I am not allowed to report what you say here. I'm not allowed to discuss it with anybody else. The only thing that I am allowed to report is if I hear you intend to inflict specific harm to someone, and this conversation is not being recorded. And lastly, despite what some fringe groups on the internet would have you believe, you are not required to stay here. You are not required to divulge anything you do not want to talk about. This room is for you, and only for you. There is no containment, and there is no security team outside waiting to take you in if something goes wrong. This is all about what you want, what you need, what works best for you. Anything you need to make you more comfortable, we will provide in future sessions. This is just so we can scope out what will be helpful for you. Okay? Does that all sound good? You look nervous about something. No, that's right. No security team at all. Not really room for one on this floor, I'd say. I wouldn't worry. We've never needed a security team before, and somehow I don't think we're going to need one today. I assure you, everybody outside is perfectly safe. Like I said, we don't need one, so don't worry. Now, enough about that. What brings you here today? I'd like to hear it in your words, if that's okay. No, take your time. It's absolutely fine. Ah, I see. So, you're having trouble killing people. You'd be surprised how often that comes up with fledgling vampires. Yes, funnily enough, a lot of people, when they're newly turned, despite what pop culture would like you to believe, a lot of people struggle with murder. It's a bit of a mental hurdle to get over. You know, the need to kill, to drink blood. There's this myth about vampires suddenly descending into the darkest depths of terror and monstrosity the moment they're turned, but in truth it's complicated. Vampires need blood, and that's it. Now, the good news is, especially nowadays, you don't have to kill people in order to get it, so this mental hurdle about being unable to kill people isn't really the problem that a lot of people will make you think it is. And frankly, it's one that we'd prefer you not to worry about too much. This is your third dose. I see. Okay. It's a hard thing to adapt to, isn't it? Yes. Are you starting to develop a taste for it? Ah, you don't want to. Why's that? I see. Okay, so, and again, correct me if I'm interpreting this incorrectly. You're worried because you fear that you're not a good person, because of the vampire thing, and you worry that you're not going to make a good vampire because you might struggle with the moral hurdle of killing someone. And not to be dismissive of that, but you think that makes you a bad person? No, I don't think so. I would argue most people would consider you to be a responsible person. In fact, one would argue it's the bare minimum we need for a society to operate. People not killing each other. Sorry, I shouldn't sound so sarcastic. It's not very professional of me, but the good news is you don't have to kill anyone. Oh, you're a fledgling. Did they do that hazing thing with you? You know, some of the younger vampires, once they've turned and they get their first taste of strength, they like to tease initiates and fledglings by saying things like, oh no, what is it? We are the apocalypse, or humans are but cattle before us, and we are a more evolved species. You know, the shark thing. They do the shark thing, you know? A shark has to hunt, it's just nature. All of that is absolute nonsense. None of that's even like a little bit true. No, funnily enough, most vampire elders figured out a while ago that murdering people isn't really an effective strategy long term. You know, and most people, thankfully, aren't super thrilled with the prospect of having to murder people night by night. If nothing else, it's stressful, and time management becomes an absolute hassle with that. I mean, if you have to plan a murder every single day for an entire cabal of vampires, then, I mean, that just gets impractical after a while, and no one ever finds any hobbies. Vampires wouldn't have a society at that point. They'd just be, well, rabid dogs. And we wouldn't be sitting here having this pleasant conversation about it. No. So, good news right off the bat. You don't have to kill anyone in order to get blood. There are plenty of other places to get it. Okay? No, that's good. That's good. You're still worried about drinking it. Why? Okay. No, I understand that. That's quite common, actually. A lot of people can feel quite monstrous the first time they drink blood. I imagine that's why you hid your face when you were drinking it just now. Yes. No, of course. I understand that perfectly. But you are not a monster for eating what you need to survive. Okay? It's like any form of medication. There is no shame in that. That is just what you need to get through life. Okay? It would be irresponsible of you not to take it. It would be irresponsible of you not to drink. You would be doing yourself harm. But like humans with water, it's as natural as that. It may not seem natural to someone who was raised in a human society, and I understand that, but it is a perfectly natural thing, as long as you can source it responsibly. You're not a monster for drinking blood. You'd be a monster if you were killing people to get it. But you're not. And you're not going to be. We're going to make sure of that. The popular image of vampires isn't quite the truth of it. Being a vampire doesn't inherently make you a monster. They're a very ancient culture with a lot of layers to them. Oh, it's true. If all you've ever heard is the hazing and the stories people tell, then you may not know this, but they're very passionate. They care deeply about art and history, avid collectors. Once this whole world was declassified and the vampires could be public about their collections, we found so much out about the ancient world. Like the Library of Alexandria. Remember that? Scholars the world over mourned the loss of that collection. And it was only when we found out that vampires existed and could be part of the wider society, that we learned that many accurate translations were preserved from those times. Many people who even remembered them. Historians and scholars discovered old techniques and new information about the old times we lived in. Even language developed down new paths as a result. We learned so much about the ancient world because the vampires existed, because the vampires had endured. So many civilizations that would otherwise have been completely forgotten were saved in memory because of the vampires. Now that's a tradition to be proud of, isn't it? Exactly. And even if that's not to your liking, there are many other things, you know. There are old paintings as well that the world had never seen before, new techniques that people are starting to experiment with. There's even a group of younger vampires I know that that love keeping old video games alive, you know? They maintain the servers and have little games they play. They try and make sure that even ones on consoles that no longer exist are, you know, tuning them up and rebuilding them with the knowledge that they have. You know? I play with them occasionally. There's an old Age of Mythology server that they keep running. Did you ever play that one? Ah, I love that game. They got a surprising amount right. But yes, the vampires are very open, very loving communities. There are some more dodgy ones, but that's true of everyone, isn't it? And besides, most vampire communities do not practice the old hunting rituals. There are one or two, again, dodgy fraternities that do, but they've learned not to take things too far. They're punished very severely for it. You don't have to be part of any of them. You don't have to do a thing. Your life is yours. Yes, and let's not get into the semantics issue of whether or not vampires are actually dead. We're really in a state of unlife. You know, you feel, you think, you're alive in every way that matters. Heartbeats and pulses, they're trivial things. I see, it's not just about that, is it, though? No, that's good. I think that's healthy. I sense some other reservations from you. It's not just about the killing or the community. Ah, yes. Immortality can be a relentless thing. I have many patients who meet with me solely for the purpose of coping with it. It can be a difficult, lonely thing. That's something that I hear a lot. I don't deserve this. I don't want this. I don't know how to exist like this. It's a big step. Often, tragically, an involuntary one. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure we will in future sessions. For the isolation, I would consider reaching out, not just to people and friends of yours, but also to those communities I mentioned. There's always someone. And it's more common than you'd think. I have some good places to start, actually. There's a little leaflet over there if you'd like. There's a couple of good links, a couple of groups always looking to network with new fledglings. Yes. No, please help yourself. Now, we have limited time for this first session, so what I would like to do for the remainder of it is make sure that you have the tools you need to help yourself if you're struggling. Okay? Now, first of all, I want you to take this. Now, that is a contact number for me. If you ever need, on an urgent notice, if you ever need a session on urgent notice, call that number and we will see what we can do. I may not be able to reply straight away, but I will always reply to any message left to me on that number within a few hours. Okay? Okay, good. Now, As far as survival goes, obviously the first thing you're going to need is a supply of blood. Now, in most supermarkets these days, you'll find a decent selection in the freezers. Can be a bit pricey at the moment, yes. Cost of living and all of that. It's also a supply issue, unfortunately. We have a lot more donation drives, it's true, but you might actually be too young to remember this. But about 20 years ago, when all of this came out, there was a campaign by some overzealous people, parents, groups, churches, and the like, which objected to supernatural creatures living in their communities. We've been able to educate many people about the fact that most supernatural creatures are not a danger, and how to safely, responsibly, and compassionately handle the ones that do have an element of danger about them. However, some of their campaigning was unfortunately successful, and there is still work to be done, and one of those unfortunate pieces of legislation was the medical use exemption added to blood drives. Do you know about those? Well, it's a complicated bit of history. It seemed like a benign enough law at first. It's essentially, whenever one is donating blood, you can sign a little exemption on it that says it can only be used for medical use. It seems reasonable, but what it effectively does is it marks that blood as something that vampires will be unable to purchase, so supply lines get cut down, whittled away. It's a good precaution if we're struggling medically, but it's a clumsy measure, and not a lot's been done in consideration of the vampires that would be affected by it. All it really did was cut our supply down, and things aren't quite as easy as they were. We're working on that. So that has unfortunately jacked up the price of human blood, but there are other ways, though. A lot of people tend to look down on animal blood, for example. It's cheaper, and it's not always to everyone's taste, but it works just as well as human blood in most instances, and once you get used to it, it can be quite nice. It's not the same, but in a pinch it will do quite nicely. And again, you can usually buy quite a good selection of it. There are also blood banks run specifically by vampires. You should be able to find a list in the local area on that little leaflet I gave you. Yes, those are the ones. Those are sources that I would trust. They have a good selection. With the human blood, they don't quite have the same supply as the big supermarkets, so it can be quite expensive, but they have greater variety, and again, they will know where you can find supply if you're ever running short, so I would trust those sources well. Yes. Oh, if I had any recommendations, cow blood is okay, goat's best, but it's usually taken quite quickly, for the rituals and all that. Avoid bats and rats if you can. Not hygienic. Horses are also filthy. I wouldn't go for that. Bears, not that there are many around here, but again, it's just something to be avoided. People will often try to convince you that they've got some kind of magical solution, or, they say, drink the blood of a unicorn and it will be much, much nicer. Unicorn blood is very sickly. It's almost a sort of chalky taste to it. You don't want that. I've never tried it personally. No, I'm not a vampire, but from the friends I have that have tried it, none of them are particularly fond. So those are the sources that I would recommend if we were going down legal avenues. Unofficially, it says here your address is on North Street. Do you know that garage around the corner? If you go there from about 12 o'clock onwards, there's a night market, usually has quite a good supply. I recommend that one because they are good people, but there are others I can't vouch for. My best advice is to always trust your instincts on that. If the people don't seem right when they're offering you the blood, then it's probably not wise to hang around. Ones I know are very, very friendly and they're happy to answer questions. Another piece of advice, always check to make sure that any blood you buy is pasteurized before you purchase it. The best sources of blood will tell you in advance. Good ones will know enough to realize you know what you're talking about, and they will also reassure you if you ask them about it. If they hesitate or mention that it is fresh, make your excuses and leave. It's probably either filthy or criminally sourced, and we do not want to support those people. That's good. Now, a lot of the advice I'm going to give is physical. I know that there are a lot of psychological issues that come with being a vampire. We will address those in time. I don't want to send you off and say you can fix all of this with a nice walk in the woods. However, there are a few pieces of advice which might help, which I don't think many vampires will tell you. First of all, your body does still benefit from vitamin D. The sun is obviously a problem there, but if you can manage it, I recommend either exposing yourself to evening twilight or purchasing some UV sources. If you can build up a tolerance, sort of spend a few minutes exposed every day, it'll help fortify the skin, and after a few months you can walk around on any day that isn't murderously sunny. Should also help the mood and should also help with your social life quite a lot. You'll still be able to see a lot of your human friends, and it will help you with employability as well. So that's advice I would also offer. Secondly, your strength and physical attributes may have been enhanced, but I still recommend exercise at least 3 times a week if you can. Helps keep things moving, stops things from atrophying, joint pain, back pain. I mean, the old ones still sleep in coffins, and that is just havoc for the back. So the more you move, the more the unpleasant cycles you might be able to break. Just remember, you're not dead. Sometimes the temptation comes to lean into that, but you are not, and it is good to keep moving, good to keep engaged, keep the mind healthy, keep yourself active. And the last piece of physical advice I would give is this. Your body clock does stall as a vampire. Keep as busy as you can. Try and stay on your feet. Try to shower. Try to take action. It's very easy to give in to decay and despair. And, frankly, depression. It's all too common with vampires, I'm afraid. Now, I am happy to diagnose antidepressants for you, but vampires tend to have a tolerance to them. Blood does help, but it is not a catch-all solution. I would still recommend reaching out to friends where you can, being open about what you're going through. Talk to me if you have any need, and we can discuss wider issues at the next session. Okay, fantastic. I think that's all we have for this week. I hope this has helped you. We'll have another session next week, of course, and these are all good helplines to call if things get overwhelming. You can see there on the back of the leaflet. Now, is there anything you wanted to ask me before we wrap up? No? Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Oh, if you could send the next one in, yes. It's a full moon, so if you'd just like to go around them quite quickly. Fantastic. Thank you. See you next week.